The envelope sat in my dresser drawer for 11 years. 11 years I never touched it. 11 years I prayed I would never have to use it. But when my daughter-in-law stood in my kitchen last Tuesday and said those words to me, when she looked me dead in the eyes and told me I wasn't fit to manage my own money, I knew the time had finally come. And let me tell you something. What happened next changed everything. Not just for me, not just for her, but for my entire family. And by the time I handed her what was inside that envelope, the look on her face told me she finally understood who she had been dealing with all these years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, because if you're going to understand why that moment mattered so much, you need to know the whole story. You need to know what led up to it. You need to know who I am, who she is, and why this situation became what it became. My name is Margaret. I'm 74 years old. I've been a widow for 16 years now. My husband, Harold, passed away from a heart attack when he was 62. It happened on a Sunday morning. He was out in the garden, doing what he loved, tending to his tomatoes. One moment he was there, the next moment he was gone. Just like that. No warning, no goodbye, just silence where there used to be whistling and an empty chair at the dinner table that would never be filled again. When Harold died, I had to figure out a lot of things on my own. We had been married for 38 years. He handled most of the finances. He paid the bills. He managed our investments. He dealt with the bank. I didn't know the first thing about any of it. People assumed I was helpless. They thought I would crumble. They expected me to sell the house, move into some assisted living facility, and fade away quietly. But they didn't know me. Not really. See, what people didn't understand is that I wasn't helpless. I was grieving. Those are two very different things. Yes, I didn't know how to balance a checkbook when Harold died. Yes, I had never logged into our online banking. Yes, I had to call the electric company 3 times before I figured out how to get the bill switched to my name. But I learned. I learned everything, and I learned it fast. Within 6 months of Harold's death, I had taken complete control of our finances. I knew every account, every investment, every policy. I learned about stocks. I learned about bonds. I learned about real estate. I even took a course at the community center about financial planning for seniors. The instructor was a young man named David. Couldn't have been more than 35. He was surprised at how quickly I picked things up. He told me I had a natural mind for numbers. I told him I had a natural mind for survival, and that's what the last 16 years have been. Survival, but not just survival. Growth. I didn't just maintain what Harold left me. I grew it. I invested wisely. I took calculated risks. I diversified. That's a word David taught me. Diversify. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. So I didn't. I put them in lots of baskets, and those baskets grew. By the time I turned 70, I had nearly tripled what Harold had left behind. Nobody knew this. I never talked about money. Harold always said that people who talk about money usually don't have much of it. The ones who stay quiet are the ones you need to watch out for. So I stayed quiet. I lived modestly. I kept my same little house. I drove my same old car. I wore the same clothes I'd been wearing for years. Nobody suspected a thing, and that was exactly how I wanted it. Now, let me tell you about my son, Daniel. Daniel is my only child. He's 52 now. He was a good boy growing up. Quiet, thoughtful, kind. He did well in school. He went to college. He got a degree in engineering. He got a good job at a firm in the city. He made decent money. He was responsible. He was everything a mother could hope for. But then he met Victoria. I remember the first time Daniel brought her home. It was Thanksgiving, about 23 years ago. He was nervous, I could tell. He kept fidgeting with his tie, adjusting his collar, checking his watch. When I opened the door, there she was, tall, blonde, beautiful in that polished way that always made me feel underdressed. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She shook my hand, but her grip was weak, almost dismissive. She looked around our little house with this expression on her face. It wasn't disgust, exactly. It was more like disappointment, like she had expected more, like we weren't quite up to her standards. I tried to like her. I really did. For Daniel's sake, I tried. When they got engaged, I threw them a party. When they got married, I sat in the front row and cried happy tears. When they bought their first house, I brought over flowers and wine. When they had their children, my grandchildren, Emma and Jack, I was there in the hospital waiting room, ready to welcome them into the world. But no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, Victoria always kept me at arm's length. There was always this wall between us, this invisible barrier that I could never break through. She was polite to me, sure. She said the right things at the right times. She sent thank you cards. She invited me to holiday dinners. But there was no warmth, no genuine connection. I was an obligation to her, not a mother-in-law. I was something to be managed, not loved. For years, I accepted this. I told myself that not everyone has close relationships with their in-laws. I told myself that as long as Daniel was happy, that was all that mattered. I told myself that maybe with time, things would change. Maybe Victoria would warm up to me. Maybe we would become friends. Maybe she would see me as something more than just the old woman who raised her husband. But things didn't change. They got worse. It started small. Little comments here and there. Margaret, are you sure you should be driving at night? Your eyes aren't what they used to be. Or, Margaret, maybe you should let Daniel handle that. You don't want to strain yourself? Or, Margaret, have you thought about moving somewhere smaller? This house must be so hard to maintain on your own. At first, I brushed these comments off. I told myself she was just concerned. She was just looking out for me. She meant well. But as the years went on, the comments became more frequent, more pointed, more controlling. She started questioning my decisions. When I mentioned I was thinking about taking a trip to Europe, she laughed and said, "At your age, that seems risky." When I told her I had invested some money in a new tech fund, she frowned and said, "Do you really think that's wise? Maybe you should have Daniel look at that for you." When I decided to renovate my kitchen, she showed up at my house uninvited and told me I was being taken advantage of by the contractor. I wasn't being taken advantage of. I had gotten 3 quotes. I had checked references. I had done my research. But Victoria didn't care about any of that. She had already made up her mind. In her eyes, I was just a confused old woman who couldn't take care of herself. And then, about 5 years ago, things took a more serious turn. Daniel called me one evening. His voice sounded strange, hesitant, like he was choosing his words very carefully. He asked if we could have lunch together, just the 2 of us. No Victoria, no kids. I agreed, thinking maybe he just wanted some quality time with his mother. But when we sat down at the restaurant, I could tell something was wrong. He wouldn't look me in the eye. He kept stirring his coffee even though he takes it black. Finally, he spoke. "Mom," he said, "Victoria and I have been talking. We're worried about you." I asked him what he meant. What was there to worry about? I was healthy. I was active. I was independent. What could possibly be concerning them? He took a deep breath. We think maybe it's time to start thinking about the future, about your finances, about your living situation, about protections. I felt a chill run down my spine. Protections, I repeated. What kind of protections? He wouldn't say more. He just kept talking in circles, using words like safety and security and peace of mind. But I knew what he was really saying. I knew what Victoria had put in his head. She wanted control. Control over me, control over my money, control over my life. That night, I went home and I did something I should have done years earlier. I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. The best elder law attorney in the state, a woman named Patricia Chen. She had come highly recommended by David, my old financial advisor. He told me that if anyone tried to mess with my affairs, Patricia was the person I wanted in my corner. I met with Patricia 3 days later. I told her everything, about Harold, about the money, about Daniel and Victoria, about the lunch conversation that had left me feeling cold and afraid. Patricia listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded slowly. Margaret, she said, what you're describing is unfortunately very common. There are people out there who see elderly individuals as targets. Sometimes those people are strangers, but sometimes, she paused, sometimes they're family members. She explained to me the concept of guardianship, how, if someone could prove that I was incapable of managing my own affairs, they could petition the court to take control of my finances, my healthcare decisions, even my living arrangements. They could sell my house. They could move me anywhere they wanted. They could access all my accounts. And once that happened, it was extremely difficult to undo. I felt sick to my stomach. This couldn't be real. This couldn't happen. Not to me. Not from my own son. Not from his wife. But Patricia told me not to panic. She said there were things we could do. Protections we could put in place. Documents we could prepare. She spent the next 3 hours going over options with me. By the time I left her office, I had a plan. And more importantly, I had ammunition. That's when the envelope was created. The one that sat in my dresser drawer for 11 years. The one I never wanted to open. The one that contained everything I needed to protect myself if the worst should ever happen. For the next few years, things were relatively calm. Victoria continued with her little comments, her subtle jabs, her thinly veiled suggestions that I was losing my mind. But she never pushed too hard. She never made any real moves. I started to think that maybe I had overreacted. Maybe the lunch with Daniel had just been a one-time thing. Maybe Victoria was annoying, but harmless. I was wrong. Last year, things escalated. It started when I sold some stocks and made a significant profit. I didn't tell anyone about it, but somehow Victoria found out. To this day, I still don't know how. Maybe she had connections at my bank. Maybe she had been monitoring me somehow. I don't know, but she found out. She showed up at my house one Saturday morning, unannounced. She was furious. Her face was red. Her jaw was tight. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. She demanded to know what I was doing with Daniel's inheritance. Those were her exact words. Daniel's inheritance. As if the money was already his. As if I was just some placeholder, some caretaker, holding on to it until I died, and it could finally go to its rightful owner. I told her calmly that my finances were none of her business. I told her and that what I did with my money was my decision, not hers. I told her that if she had concerns, She could discuss them with me like an adult, not storm into my home making accusations. She didn't take that well. For the next few months, she launched a campaign. That's the only way I can describe it. A campaign to prove that I was incompetent. She started calling me every day, asking me strange questions. "What did you have for breakfast, Margaret?" "What's today's date, Margaret?" "Can you name the current president, Margaret?" She was testing me, building a case, looking for any sign of confusion or forgetfulness that she could use against me. When that didn't work, she tried a different approach. She started showing up at family gatherings and pointing out my mistakes in front of everyone. Oh, Margaret forgot Emma's birthday again. I didn't forget. I sent a card a week early because I was going on a trip. Oh, Margaret got lost on the way here. I didn't get lost. I took a different route to avoid construction. Oh, Margaret couldn't remember Jack's girlfriend's name. I remembered her name. I just chose not to use it because Jack had 3 girlfriends in the past year, and I wasn't sure if this one would last. But Victoria painted everything as evidence of my decline. She was building her case, brick by brick, and slowly she was turning my own family against me. Daniel started looking at me differently. With concern, yes, but also with doubt. He started second-guessing things I said, asking me to repeat myself, checking in on me more often than necessary. I could see it in his eyes. The seed that Victoria had planted, the idea that maybe his mother was slipping. Maybe she couldn't take care of herself anymore. Maybe something needed to be done. My grandchildren were affected too. Emma, who was always so close to me, started treating me like I was fragile. She would speak slowly, use small words, repeat herself. Jack would offer his arm every time I stood up, as if I might fall without support. They didn't mean to be hurtful. They were just kids, being influenced by their mother. But it still stung. It still hurt. And through it all, I kept quiet. I didn't defend myself. I didn't argue. I didn't try to change anyone's mind, because I knew the truth. And I knew that when the time came, the truth would speak for itself. That time came last Tuesday. It was a normal morning. I had woken up early, as I always do. I made myself some coffee and toast. I read the newspaper. I watered my plants. I was planning to go to the grocery store later. Maybe stop by the library on the way home. Just a normal day. Then the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Victoria was standing there. And she wasn't alone. Daniel was with her, and behind them a man I didn't recognize. He was wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase. He looked nervous, like he didn't want to be there. Victoria pushed past me into the house without waiting to be invited. Daniel followed, his eyes on the floor. The man in the suit hesitated at the doorway. "Can I help you?" I asked him. Before he could answer, Victoria turned around. "He's a lawyer, Margaret. We need to talk." We went into the living room. Victoria sat on my couch like she owned it. Daniel sat next to her, still not meeting my eyes. The lawyer, perched on the edge of the armchair, clutching his briefcase like a shield. Victoria wasted no time. "Margaret," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "we've been worried about you for a long time. You know that. We've tried to help you. We've tried to guide you. But you've refused to listen. You've made bad decisions, dangerous decisions, and we can't stand by and watch anymore." She nodded at the lawyer. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. His hands were trembling slightly. "These are guardianship papers," Victoria continued. "We're filing a petition with the court. We believe you are no longer capable of managing your own affairs. This is for your own good, Margaret. We're doing this because we love you. I looked at the papers, then I looked at Victoria, and then I looked at my son, my only child, who still wouldn't look at me. Daniel, I said quietly, is this what you want? He finally looked up. His eyes were red, like he had been crying, or like he hadn't slept. Mom, I don't know. Victoria says. I'm not asking what Victoria says, I interrupted. I'm asking what you want. Is this what you want? To take away your mother's independence? To control her life? To lock her up in some facility somewhere while you spend her money? It's not like that, Victoria snapped. We're trying to protect you. You're confused, Margaret. You're making mistakes. You sold off stocks without telling anyone. You're making large purchases we don't know about. You could be giving money to scammers for all we know. I'm not confused, I said calmly, and I'm not giving money to scammers. You can't even remember your grandchildren's birthdays. Emma was born on March 15th, 2002. Jack was born on November 3rd, 2004. Would you like me to recite their social security numbers as well? Because I have those memorized, too. Victoria's face went red. That's not the point. The point is that you're old, Margaret. You're alone, you're vulnerable, and you're sitting on a pile of money that you clearly can't handle responsibly. And there it was. The truth, finally out in the open. It wasn't about me. It was never about me. It was about the money. Harold's money. My money. The money I had grown and protected for 16 years. The money that Victoria believed belonged to her. She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with something I can only describe as hunger. Let's be honest here, Margaret. You're not fit to manage your money. You never have been. Harold took care of everything when he was alive. You got lucky after he died. But luck runs out. And we're not going to let you blow through our inheritance because you think you're smarter than you are. The room went silent. Even the lawyer looked uncomfortable. Daniel's face had gone pale. I stood up slowly. My joints protested, but I ignored them. I walked to the hallway, to the dresser that had stood in the same spot for 40 years. I opened the top drawer, and there it was. The hot envelope, yellow with age, slightly bent at the corners, but still sealed, still waiting. I walked back into the living room. Victoria was watching me with suspicion. Daniel looked confused. The lawyer was still clutching his briefcase. I sat down across from Victoria. I held the envelope in my hands for a moment, feeling its weight. 11 years I had carried this. 11 years I had prepared for this moment. And now it was here. Victoria, I said, my voice steady. You said I'm not fit to manage my money. That's what you truly believe, isn't it? Yes, she said defiantly. That's exactly what I believe. I nodded. Then I think you should see this. I handed her the envelope. She took it, frowning. She turned it over, looking at the front, the back. There was no writing on it. Nothing to indicate what was inside. Just a plain yellow envelope. What is this? She asked. Open it. She tore it open impatiently. Inside were several documents. She pulled them out and began reading, and as she read, I watched her face change. First, confusion, then disbelief, then shock, then something I had never seen on Victoria's face before. Fear. Her hands started shaking. The papers rustled as she shuffled through them. Page after page, her expression growing more and more horrified. This can't be, she stammered. What is it? Daniel asked, reaching for the papers. Victoria pulled them away from him. Nothing. It's nothing. It's not nothing, I said calmly. Daniel, You should see what your wife has been so concerned about." I reached over and took the papers from Victoria's trembling hands. She didn't resist. All the fight had gone out of her. I handed them to Daniel. He started reading, and I watched the same journey play out on his face. Confusion, disbelief, and then understanding. The first document was a full financial statement. Every account I owned, every investment, every asset, the total value. Daniel's eyes went wide when he saw the number. It was significantly more than he had ever imagined. Significantly more than Victoria had ever guessed. The second document was a detailed log. Every financial decision I had made in the past 16 years, with explanations, outcomes, and returns. Every stock I bought, every bond I sold, every investment I made, all of it documented, organized, analyzed. The log showed a consistent pattern of growth, smart decisions, calculated risks that paid off. It was the opposite of incompetence. It was brilliance. The third document was a letter from my financial advisor, David. In it, he stated that in his 20 years of practice, he had never worked with a client as sharp, as capable, as financially savvy as Margaret Helen Thornton. He stated that any suggestion that I was incapable of managing my affairs was not only false, but laughable. The fourth document was a cognitive evaluation from a neurologist. I had taken the test voluntarily just 3 months ago. The results showed that my mental faculties were fully intact. Better than intact, actually. My memory, my reasoning, my problem-solving abilities were all in the top percentile for my age group. There was no sign of dementia, no sign of confusion, no sign of decline. The fifth document was a legal statement from Patricia Chen, my attorney. It outlined in great detail Victoria's behavior over the past several years, the constant questioning, the attempts to undermine my credibility, the efforts to isolate me from family members, the campaign to make everyone believe I was incompetent. Patricia's statement made it clear that Victoria's actions constituted a pattern of elder abuse, emotional abuse, financial coercion, all documented, all witnessed, all ready to be presented to a court if necessary. And the sixth document, the one that made Victoria's face turn white as a sheet. It was my will, not just any will, a new will, one I had drawn up with Patricia's help 11 years ago, right after that concerning lunch with Daniel, and it had been updated regularly ever since. In this will, I had made several provisions. The first provision stated that if any family member attempted to gain guardianship over me without my consent, they would be immediately and permanently disinherited. No exceptions, no appeals, nothing. The second provision stated that if any family member engaged in a pattern of behavior designed to undermine my independence or control my assets, they would be immediately and permanently disinherited. The third provision stated that my estate would be managed by an independent trust, a trust that Victoria would never ever be able to touch. The fourth provision named the beneficiaries. My grandchildren, Emma and Jack, would each receive a substantial amount. Daniel would receive a portion as well, but with conditions. Conditions that ensured Victoria could never access his inheritance. It would be protected from any divorce proceedings, any joint account claims, any attempts to convert it to marital property, and the fifth provision, the one that made Victoria's eyes fill with tears, a charitable trust, funded by a significant portion of my estate, millions of dollars to be exact, going to various charities I had supported throughout my life, animal shelters, children's hospitals, education funds for underprivileged youth, food banks, environmental organizations, all the causes that mattered to me. Money that, if Victoria had just left me alone, could have gone to the family, but now, because of her actions, would go elsewhere. Daniel looked up from the papers. His face was ashen. "Mom, I didn't know. I didn't." "I know you didn't," I said gently. "That's why I've protected you, too. Your portion of the inheritance is safe. Victoria can't touch it. Even if you divorce, even if she tries to claim it, she can't get to it." Patricia made sure of that. Victoria was crying now, real tears running down her carefully made-up face. "Margaret, please. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. I was just trying to." "You were trying to take control of an old woman," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "You saw me as weak, as confused, as someone you could manipulate. You thought that because I was old and alone, I was an easy target. But you made a mistake, Victoria. A very big mistake." I leaned forward, looking directly into her eyes. "You underestimated me." The room was silent. Victoria's tears had stopped. She was just staring at me, her mouth slightly open, her eyes wide with something that looked almost like respect. Or maybe it was fear, or maybe it was both. Daniel set the papers down on the coffee table. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from when he was a boy, trying to solve a difficult problem. "Mom," he said finally, "what happens now?" I looked at my son. My beautiful, kind, easily influenced son. He wasn't a bad person. He never was. He had just fallen under the influence of someone who was. Someone who had used him, manipulated him, turned him against his own mother. And despite everything, I still loved him. I would always love him. "That depends," I said. "It depends on what you want to happen." I gestured toward the papers on the table. "Those documents are copies. The originals are with Patricia, in a secure location, along with everything else. Video recordings of Victoria's behavior at family gatherings, audio recordings of phone calls, emails, text messages, everything." Victoria's face went even paler. If that was possible, she clearly hadn't known about the recordings. "I'm not a vindictive person," I continued. "I don't want to destroy anyone's life. I just want to be left alone. I want to live my remaining years in peace, in my own home, making my own decisions, managing my own money. That's all I've ever wanted." I looked at Victoria. "If you can accept that, if you can stop trying to control me, if you can treat me with basic respect and dignity, then we can move forward. The will stays as it is. But we don't have to be enemies. We can be family." Victoria swallowed hard. She nodded, almost imperceptibly. "But if you ever try anything like this again," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, "if you ever bring a lawyer to my house with guardianship papers, if you ever try to undermine my independence or take my money, I will not hesitate. Everything in that envelope will be submitted to the court. And it won't just be about disinheritance. It will be about charges, elder abuse charges, financial exploitation charges. You could lose everything, Victoria. Your reputation, your freedom, everything." I let that sink in. "Do we understand each other?" Victoria nodded again, more vigorously this time. "Yes," she whispered. "We understand each other." The lawyer, who had been sitting in stunned silence throughout this entire exchange, finally spoke up. "So, I take it you won't be needing my services for the guardianship petition?" I looked at him with something close to pity. "No, young man. I don't think we will." He couldn't pack up his briefcase fast enough. He was out the door in less than a minute, practically running to his car. I never saw him again. Daniel and Victoria stayed a bit longer. Not because they wanted to, I think, but because they didn't know what else to do. The power dynamic had shifted so completely, so suddenly, that they seemed lost. I made tea. It seemed like the right thing to do. We sat in the living room, the same room where Victoria had tried to take my freedom just 30 minutes earlier, and we drank tea like civilized people. "Mom," Daniel said finally, breaking the long silence, "I'm sorry. I should have trusted you. I should have stood up for you. I should have." He couldn't finish. His voice broke, and he looked down at his cup. "I know," I said, "but you're here now, and that's what matters." Victoria was quiet. She had barely touched her tea. She was staring at a spot on the wall, her mind clearly elsewhere. I could only imagine what she was thinking. All those years of planning, of scheming, of building her case, all of it destroyed in an instant. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. That was last Tuesday, a week ago now, and a lot has changed since then. Victoria has been remarkably pleasant. She called me the next day to apologize again, and this time it sounded genuine, or at least genuine enough. She asked if there was anything she could do to make things right. I told her that time would tell, that trust, once broken, takes a long time to rebuild. Daniel has been calling me every day. Not to check up on me, not to test my memory or look for signs of confusion. Just to talk, to catch up, to be my son again. He told me that he's been having a lot of long conversations with himself about who he is, about who he let himself become. He said he's thinking about seeing a therapist. I told him I thought that was a wonderful idea. Emma came to visit me yesterday, without her parents. She sat in my kitchen, and we talked for 3 hours straight. She asked me about Harold, about our marriage, about the early years before she was born. She asked me about the money, about how I learned to manage it, about what advice I would give to a young woman just starting out in life. I told her everything, and when she left, she hugged me tighter than she has in years. Jack texted me, just a simple message, "Love you, Grandma." But from a 20-year-old boy, that means the world. And me? I'm still here, still in my house, still making my own decisions, still managing my own money, still living my life on my own terms. The envelope is back in my dresser drawer. The copies, anyway. The originals are still with Patricia, where they'll stay until I die, just in case. But I don't think I'll need them again. I think Victoria learned her lesson. I think Daniel found his spine. I think the family dynamics have shifted in a way that won't easily shift back. And if I am wrong, if Victoria tries again, if she comes after me with lawyers and guardianship papers and campaigns to prove I'm incompetent, well, she knows what's waiting for her. Let me tell you something that I've learned in my 74 years on this earth. Getting old is not easy. Your body slows down, your friends die, the world changes around you in ways that make you feel like a stranger in your own life. People start looking at you differently. They start talking to you differently. They start treating you like you're already gone, like you're just waiting for the inevitable. But here's what they don't understand. Getting old also means something else. It means you've survived. Every year you live is a year of challenges faced, obstacles overcome, battles won. Every wrinkle on your face is a story. Every gray hair is a lesson learned. When you're 74, you've been through things that younger people can't even imagine. You've buried loved ones. You've weathered economic crashes. You've survived wars, pandemics, personal tragedies that would break most people. And you're still standing. That's not weakness. That's strength. A strength that young people don't recognize because they haven't earned it yet. Victoria thought she saw a weak old woman when she looked at me. She saw someone to be managed, controlled, exploited. She didn't see the woman who raised a child on her own for 4 years, while Harold was deployed overseas. She didn't see the woman who worked 2 jobs to put that child through college. She didn't see the woman who taught herself financial management from scratch after her husband died, who turned grief into action, who built a small fortune through discipline and determination and sheer stubborn will. She didn't see any of that. She just saw old, and that was her mistake. I think about Harold sometimes. What he would think of all this. He would be proud of me. I know that much. He was always proud of me, even when I didn't give him reason to be. He would have loved to see the look on Victoria's face when she read those documents. He would have laughed that big, booming laugh of his and said something like, "That's my Margaret, always 10 steps ahead." I miss him. I'll always miss him. But I know he's watching. Wherever he is, whatever comes after this life, he's watching and he's cheering me on. There's a reason I'm telling you all of this. And it's not just because I need to get it off my chest, although that's part of it. It's because I know I'm not alone. There are millions of elderly people out there in situations like mine, people whose families see them as burdens, as problems to be managed, as walking bank accounts waiting to be emptied, people who are told they're too old, too confused, too weak to handle their own affairs, people who are pressured, manipulated, coerced into giving up control of their lives. And many of them don't have an envelope in their dresser drawer. They don't have a Patricia Chen in their corner. They don't have 11 years of documentation and preparation. They're vulnerable. And there are people out there, people like Victoria, who prey on that vulnerability. If you're one of those people, if you're elderly and scared and feeling like the walls are closing in, I want you to know something. You are not helpless. You are not weak. You are not too old to fight back. Find a lawyer. Find a good one who specializes in elder law. Tell them your story. Let them help you put protections in place. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't assume that your family would never do this to you. Don't believe that it can't happen to you, because it can. It does. Every single day, in every city and town across this country, elderly people are being taken advantage of by the very people who are supposed to love and protect them. And the only way to stop it is to be prepared. That's my message. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm telling this story. And if you're young, if you're someone with elderly parents or grandparents, I have a message for you too. Look at your family members. Really look at them. Are you treating them with respect? Are you listening to their wishes? Are you supporting their independence? Or are you, even unconsciously, starting to see them as less than? As people who need to be managed rather than respected? As problems to be solved rather than individuals with their own hopes and dreams and desires? Check yourself before you become a Victoria, before you do something you can't take back, before you destroy a relationship that should be precious. Because here's the truth. We're all going to get old someday, if we're lucky. And when that day comes, how would you want to be treated? What would you want your family to do? Think about that. Really think about it. Now, I want to tell you more about what happened after that day, because the story doesn't end with Victoria reading those documents. There's more, a lot more, and some of it surprised even me. About 3 days after that confrontation, I got a phone call. It was from Victoria. I almost didn't answer. Part of me thought she was calling to try again, to find some angle I hadn't thought of, some loophole in my defenses. But I answered anyway. Her voice was different. Smaller somehow, humbler. She asked if we could meet. Just the two of us. No Daniel, no lawyers, no agenda. Just a conversation. I agreed. Partly out of curiosity, partly out of that stubborn hope that people can change. We met at a cafe downtown, neutral ground. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table nursing a cup of coffee. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept in days, like the weight of everything that had happened was pressing down on her. I sat across from her. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said something that caught me completely off guard. I was wrong, she said, about everything. I waited, not sure where this was going. I've spent the last 3 days thinking, she continued, barely sleeping. Just thinking about what I did, about why I did it, about what kind of person I've become. She looked up at me, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. I'm not going to make excuses, she said. There are no excuses. What I did was wrong. What I tried to do to you was wrong. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception, for hints that this was just another manipulation. But all I saw was pain. Genuine pain. The kind that comes from finally seeing yourself clearly. Why? I asked. Why did you do it? She took a shaky breath. Fear, she said. That's what it comes down to. Fear. I didn't understand. Fear of what? Fear of losing everything? Fear of not having enough? Fear of, I don't know. Fear of being out of control. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she was trying to draw warmth from it. I didn't grow up like Daniel, she said. My family didn't have much. We lived paycheck to paycheck. Sometimes there wasn't enough food. Sometimes we couldn't pay the bills. I remember my mother crying at the kitchen table, trying to figure out how to make the numbers work. I remember wearing second-hand clothes and being made fun of at school. I remember feeling like we were always on the edge, always one bad break away from disaster. She paused, collecting herself. When I met Daniel, I thought I'd finally escaped all that. He had a good job, a stable income, a future, and his parents. You and Harold. You seemed so comfortable, so secure, like money was never something you had to worry about. I wanted that. I wanted that security so badly. So you tried to take it, I said. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. She nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. I told myself I was protecting our family, protecting our children, making sure they would never have to go through what I went through. But that's not really true, is it? I wasn't protecting anyone. I was just grabbing, hoarding, trying to control everything because I was terrified of having nothing. I sat back in my chair, absorbing this. I had never thought about Victoria's past before. I had never asked about her childhood, her family, her fears. I had just seen her as an obstacle, an enemy, a threat to be neutralized. But now, for the first time, I was seeing her as a person. A flawed, frightened, deeply broken person. When I read those documents, she continued, when I saw everything you had accomplished, everything you had built, it hit me. You did all of that after Harold died. You were alone, just like my mother was alone. But you didn't crumble. You didn't give up. You got stronger. You took control of your life in a way my mother never could. She looked at me with something like wonder. How? She asked. How did you do it? I thought about the question. It deserved an honest answer. I had no choice, I said finally. When Harold died, I could either fall apart or figure things out. Those were my only options. And falling apart wasn't going to bring him back. It wasn't going to pay the bills. It wasn't going to secure my future. So I learned. I educated myself. I asked for help when I needed it. And I did the work even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. I leaned forward, looking into her eyes. Victoria, money isn't security. Not really. I know it feels that way. I know it seems like it. If you just have enough, you'll be safe forever. But that's an illusion. Money can disappear in an instant. Investments fail. Banks collapse. The market crashes. The only real security is inside yourself. It's the knowledge that no matter what happens, no matter what you lose, you have the strength and the skills to rebuild. She was crying openly now, not even trying to hide it. I'm going to give you some advice, I said. You can take it or leave it. But I think you need to hear it. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Stop trying to control everything. Stop trying to hoard money like it's going to save you. Start building real security. Learn skills. Develop resilience. Create connections with people that aren't based on what they can give you financially. Those are the things that will carry you through hard times, not a number in a bank account. I reached across the table and took her hand. She looked surprised by the gesture. And forgive yourself, I added. What you did was wrong, but it doesn't have to define you. You can change. You can be better. But only if you stop punishing yourself and start growing. She held onto my hand like it was a lifeline. Can you forgive me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I considered the question. Could I? After everything she had put me through? After years of subtle abuse, of undermining, of manipulation? After she tried to take away my freedom, my independence, my life? I thought about Harold. What would he do? He was always better at forgiveness than I was. He never held grudges. He said that holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It only hurt you. It only kept you trapped. I don't know, I said honestly. Forgiveness isn't something that happens all at once. It's a process. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to see if we can build something better. Not for the past, but for the future, for Daniel, for Emma and Jack, for all of us. She squeezed my hand. Thank you, she said. That's more than I deserve. We stayed at that cafe for another 2 hours. We talked about things we had never talked about before. Her childhood, mine, the dreams we had when we were young, the disappointments we had faced, the regrets we carried. By the time we left, something had shifted. I wouldn't call us friends, not exactly. There was still too much history between us for that. But we were no longer enemies. We were family members who had hurt each other and were now trying to find a way forward. I don't know if the truce will hold. I don't know if Victoria will truly change. People often don't. They slip back into old patterns, especially when things get hard. But I've decided to give her the chance, to give us all the chance, because life is too short for permanent grudges, because family is precious, even when it's painful, because hope is the only thing that keeps us moving forward. And if I'm wrong, if Victoria reverts to her old ways, if she tries again, well, the envelope is still in my dresser, and I'm not afraid to use it. Now I want to talk about something else, something I haven't shared with many people. It's about the money itself, about what it really means, about why I've held on to it so tightly all these years. When Harold died, he left me more than I expected. He had been saving and investing for years, quietly, without telling me the full extent of it. The life insurance alone was substantial, but combined with his retirement accounts, his investments, the equity in our house, I was stunned when the lawyers laid it all out for me. My first instinct was to give it away. Not because I didn't need it, but because it felt wrong. Like blood money almost. Money that only existed because my husband was dead. Every dollar felt like a reminder of his absence. But then I started thinking about what Harold would want. He wasn't the kind of man who believed in waste. He worked hard for every penny he earned. He made sacrifices. He planned for the future. To just give it away, to squander it on impulse, would be to dishonor everything he built. So I made a promise to myself. I would take what Harold left me and make it grow. I would honor his legacy by being a good steward of what he gave me. I would learn everything he knew about money and more. I would prove that his trust in me was not misplaced. And that's what I did. For 16 years, every investment, every decision, every risk I took was guided by the thought, what would Harold think? Would he be proud of this? Would he approve? Most of the time, I think the answer was yes. There were failures, of course. Investments that didn't pan out. Decisions that cost me money instead of making it. Times when I doubted myself. When I thought maybe Victoria was right. Maybe I didn't know what I was doing. Maybe I should hand control to someone else. But I pushed through. I learned from my mistakes. I adjusted my strategies. And over time, I got better. Much better. By the time Victoria came at me with those guardianship papers, I was managing a portfolio worth several $1,000,000, and I had done it entirely on my own. No financial advisor making decisions for me. No family members with their hands in the pot. Just me, Margaret Helen Thornton, 74 years old and sharper than ever. That's what Victoria never understood. She saw an old woman in a modest house, driving a modest car, wearing modest clothes. She assumed that what you see is what you get. But I've never been about appearances. I never needed fancy things to feel good about myself. I found my value in other things, in my skills, my knowledge, my accomplishments. Now let me tell you what I decided to do after all this happened, because you might be wondering about the charitable trust I mentioned, the money that was going to go away from the family because of Victoria's actions. After that conversation at the cafe, after I saw her tears and heard her story and understood a bit more about who she really was, I made some changes. Not because I felt guilty, and not because I thought she suddenly deserved more, but because I realized something important. Punishment isn't the same as justice, and justice isn't the same as healing. If my goal had just been to hurt Victoria, to make her pay for what she did, then the original will was perfect. She would have watched millions of dollars flow to strangers, while her family got a fraction of what could have been theirs. And that would have been poetic justice in a way. But that's not what I wanted. Not really. I wanted to protect myself. I wanted to establish boundaries. I wanted to make sure no one could ever control me again. And I had done all of that. The documents had served their purpose. Victoria understood what I was capable of. The threat was established. The message was received. So I called Patricia. I told her I wanted to make some modifications to the will. She was surprised, but she understood when I explained my reasoning. The charitable trust would still exist. I wasn't changing that. The causes I cared about would still receive significant support, but I adjusted the amounts. I reallocated some of what would have gone to charity back to the family. Not to Victoria directly, never that, but to Daniel and the grandchildren. A bit more than before. I also added a provision, a new one. If Victoria ever attempted anything like this again, if there was any evidence of manipulation or coercion, Everything would revert to the original will. No second chances, no appeals, total disinheritance. But if she kept the peace, if she remained respectful, if she allowed me to live my life on my own terms, the family would benefit. It was a carrot and stick approach. The stick was always there, always visible, always threatening. But now there was also a carrot, an incentive to behave, a reward for respect. Patricia called it a masterpiece of estate planning. I just called it common sense. Let me tell you about the months that followed, because real life isn't like the movies. There's no dramatic music, no credits rolling, no neat ending where everyone lives happily ever after. Real life is messy. It's complicated. It's a series of small moments and that add up to something bigger. After that day at the cafe with Victoria, things started to change in our family. Slowly at first, then more noticeably. The first Thanksgiving after the incident was awkward. Everyone was walking on eggshells. Victoria barely spoke. Daniel kept trying to fill the silence with forced conversation. Emma and Jack kept exchanging confused glances, clearly aware that something had happened, but not knowing the full story. I decided to break the tension. Halfway through dinner, I stood up and raised my glass. "I want to say something," I announced. Everyone froze. Victoria looked like she might faint. "This year has been difficult," I continued. "There have been misunderstandings. There have been mistakes. There have been moments when this family felt more like a battlefield than a home." I looked around the table at each of them. My son, who had almost betrayed me. His wife, who had tried to take everything from me. My grandchildren, who had been caught in the middle of something they didn't fully understand. "But we're still here," I said. "We're still together, and that means something. It means we have a chance to do better, to be better, to be the family we're supposed to be." I raised my glass higher. "To second chances." There was a moment of silence. Then Daniel raised his glass. Then Emma. Then Jack. And finally, after a long pause, Victoria. "To second chances," they echoed. It wasn't a magic fix. One toast doesn't erase years of tension and hurt, but it was a start. A real start. Over the following months, Victoria made genuine efforts. She stopped with the little comments about my age and my capabilities. She stopped questioning my decisions. She even started asking for my advice occasionally. Financial advice, of all things. At first, I was suspicious. Was this just another manipulation? Another way to get close to me, to learn my secrets, to find new angles of attack? But as time went on, I realized it was genuine. Victoria was genuinely trying to learn. She had taken my words at the cafe to heart. She was trying to build real security, the kind that doesn't depend on controlling other people. I started teaching her. Nothing fancy at first, just basic concepts. How to read a financial statement, how to evaluate an investment, how to think about risk and reward. She was a quick learner, sharper than I had given her credit for. Daniel noticed the change. He told me once, during one of our daily phone calls, that Victoria was different at home. Calmer, less anxious, less obsessed with money and control. He said it was like living with a different person. I didn't take credit for it. Victoria did the work herself, but I was glad I had given her the chance. Emma graduated from college that spring. She got a job at a nonprofit organization, helping underprivileged kids get access to education. The irony wasn't lost on me. My granddaughter was now working for the kind of organization that my charitable trust would be funding. She came to visit me after her first week of work. She was glowing with enthusiasm, talking a mile a minute about all the kids she was meeting, all the difference she was going to make. "Grandma," she said, "I know what you did with your will. Dad told me about the charitable trust, about the money going to education funds. I hadn't intended for Daniel to share those details, but I wasn't upset that he had. I just want you to know," Emma continued, "that it inspired me, the way you're using your money to help people. It made me realize that wealth isn't just about having things. It's about what you do with what you have." She hugged me tight. "I want to be like you when I'm older," she whispered. I couldn't speak for a moment. My throat was too tight with emotion. Jack came around in his own way. He started texting me more often, not just "love you, Grandma" messages, although those continued. He started asking me questions about life, about decisions, about how to handle difficult situations. He was 21 now, trying to figure out who he wanted to be. One day, he called me instead of texting. He was going through a tough time. His girlfriend had broken up with him. His job wasn't going well. He felt lost. We talked for 2 hours. I told him about the times in my life when I had felt lost. After Harold died, when I first had to learn about finances, and when Victoria started her campaign against me, I told him that feeling lost was normal. It meant you were searching for something, and searching was the first step toward finding. "How do you know if you're making the right decisions?" he asked. I thought about it. "You don't," I admitted. "Not always. Sometimes you just have to make a decision and see what happens. And if it turns out wrong, you learn from it and make a different decision. That's all any of us can do." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Thanks, Grandma. I needed to hear that." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time thinking about my grandchildren, about the people they were becoming, about the role I had played in shaping them. For so long, I had been focused on protecting myself, on building walls, on preparing for battle, and those things were necessary. I don't regret them. But now, I was realizing that protection wasn't enough. I also had a chance to build something, to pass on not just money, but wisdom, not just assets, but values, not just an inheritance, but a legacy. That became my new focus, not just guarding what I had, but giving what I could. And I don't mean money, I mean time, attention, love, the things that really matter. I started having regular dinners with the family, once a week, every Sunday. At first, it was just me and Daniel. Then Emma started joining. Then Jack. And eventually, Victoria. We cooked together. We talked. We laughed. We argued sometimes about politics or sports or whether pineapple belongs on pizza. Normal family stuff. The kind of stuff I had thought was lost to us forever. Daniel told me once that these dinners were the highlight of his week. He said he had missed me for years, without even realizing it. Victoria had kept him so busy, so distracted, so focused on other things, that he had lost touch with his own mother. "I'm not going to let that happen again," he promised. I believed him. Victoria and I developed something I never expected. Not friendship exactly, but respect, mutual understanding. We would never be close, not in the way that some mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law are. There was too much history for that. But we could be civil. We could be kind. We could be family. One evening after dinner, Victoria pulled me aside. She wanted to talk privately. "I've been thinking about what you said," she told me, "about building real security, about not depending on money to feel safe." I waited, not sure where this was going. I started seeing a therapist, she said, to work through some of the stuff from my childhood. The fear, the anxiety, the need to control everything. I was genuinely surprised. Victoria had never struck me as someone who would seek that kind of help. It's hard, she admitted, really hard. But I'm learning things about myself, things I never wanted to face before. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face. Vulnerability. Real, honest vulnerability. Thank you, she said, for not destroying me when you could have, for giving me a chance to be better. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, and that seemed to be enough. The months turned into a year, then 2 years. Life continued. I continued. I celebrated my 76th birthday, surrounded by family. Daniel gave me flowers. Victoria gave me a scarf she had knitted herself. Emma gave me a photo album of our family, going all the way back to when Harold was alive. Jack gave me a card that made me laugh so hard I cried. It was a good day, one of the best I'd had in a long time. I think about Harold a lot, especially on days like that. I wonder what he would think of how things turned out. I like to believe he would be proud. Proud that I protected myself. Proud that I stood my ground. But also proud that I found a way to bring the family back together. Harold always believed in the good in people, even when they didn't deserve it. He used to say that everyone has the capacity for change if they're given the right push. Victoria got the push she needed, and she changed. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to make a difference. I know there are people out there who would say I was too soft, that I should have cut Victoria out completely, that I should have disinherited her and Daniel and never looked back. And maybe they're right. Maybe that would have been the safer choice, the smarter choice. But safety and smarts aren't everything. Sometimes you have to take risks. Sometimes you have to believe in possibilities. Sometimes you have to choose hope over fear. That's what I did, and I don't regret it. Now, I'm not saying everything is perfect. It's not. There are still tensions, still awkward moments, still times when old patterns threaten to resurface. Just last month, Victoria made a comment about my driving that had a little too much edge to it. I gave her a look, and she caught herself and apologized. Progress, not perfection. The envelope is still in my dresser drawer. The originals are still with Patricia. The protections are still in place. I'm not naive. I know that people can slip backwards. I know that circumstances can change. I know that the peace we've built could shatter at any moment. But until that happens, if it happens, I'm going to live my life. I'm going to enjoy my family. I'm going to keep growing my money and supporting my causes and being the independent, capable woman I've always been. And if anyone ever tries to take that from me again, they know what's waiting for them. I want to leave you with something. Some final thoughts. Things I've learned through all of this that might help you, wherever you are in your life. First, never underestimate yourself. I was told in countless ways that I was too old, too confused, too weak to manage my own affairs. If I had believed that, if I had accepted it, I would have lost everything. But I knew my own worth. I knew what I was capable of. And that knowledge was my greatest weapon. Second, prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. The envelope in my dresser wasn't a plan for revenge. It was a plan for protection. I never wanted to use it. I spent 11 years hoping I would never have to. But when the time came, I was ready. And that readiness saved me. Third, forgiveness isn't weakness. It takes strength to hold on to anger, but it takes even more strength to let it go. When I forgave Victoria, I wasn't excusing what she did. I wasn't pretending it didn't happen. I was choosing to move forward instead of staying stuck in the past. That choice freed me. It freed all of us. Fourth, family is complicated. It's messy and painful and frustrating. It can bring out the worst in people, but it can also bring out the best. The same people who hurt us are often the ones who love us most. And navigating that contradiction is one of the hardest things any of us will ever do. Fifth, and finally, your life is yours, not your children's, not your spouse's, not your in-laws. Yours. You have the right to make your own decisions, manage your own money, live in your own home, and determine your own future. Anyone who tries to take that from you, no matter how good their intentions seem, is crossing a line. Don't let them. I'm 76 years old now. I don't know how many years I have left. Could be 20. Could be 2. Could be 200. You never know. But however long I have, I'm going to live it on my own terms, in my own house, with my own money, making my own choices. That's not stubbornness. That's not pride. That's just self-respect. And it's something every single person deserves, no matter their age. So if you're watching this and you're elderly, if you're in a situation where someone is trying to control you or take advantage of you, know that you're not alone. Know that there are resources out there. Know that you have rights, and know that fighting back is possible. Find your Patricia Chen, prepare your envelope, build your defenses, and never ever let anyone tell you that you're not fit to manage your own life. Because you are. You absolutely are. That's my story. From the beginning to now, from the moment Victoria walked into my kitchen with a lawyer and guardianship papers, to the family dinners we share every Sunday, from the lowest point to something that looks a lot like healing. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. It wasn't painless. But it was worth it. Every single moment was worth it. Harold, if you're watching from wherever you are, I hope I made you proud. I hope I honored what you built. And I hope when my time comes, I'll see you again and tell you all about it. Until then, I'll keep going, keep growing, keep living, because that's what we do. That's what survivors do. We survive. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think about this whole situation? Was I right to give Victoria a second chance? Or should I have cut her off completely? Did Daniel do enough to make things right? Or should he have stood up for me sooner? What would you have done if you were in my position? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story meant something to you, if it helped you in any way, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next.